In the summer heat of 1839, smoke rose from the coast of southern China. At Humen, near the great trading port of Canton, thousands of chests of opium were broken open, mixed with lime and salt water, and washed into the sea. The order came from Lin Zexu, an imperial commissioner sent by the Qing emperor to stop a poison that was eating through the empire. It looked like a victory. But within 3 years, British warships would sail up China's coast, the Qing dynasty would be forced to sign the Treaty of Nanjing, and the old empire would discover that the drug it tried to destroy had already exposed something far more dangerous than addiction. It had exposed weakness. This is the story of how opium helped ruin the Qing dynasty. Not by itself. No single drug toppled one of the largest empires on earth. The Qing dynasty was already under pressure from population growth, corruption, silver shortages, local unrest, and a world economy changing faster than the imperial court could understand. But opium struck at all of these weaknesses at once. It drained wealth. It damaged families. It corrupted officials. It brought foreign smugglers, gunboats, and unequal treaties to China's shores. And once the Qing court lost control of the opium trade, it began to lose control of the story of its own power. For more than a century, the Qing dynasty had ruled China as one of the greatest empires in the world. Founded in 1644 by the Manchus, a people from beyond the Great Wall, the Qing expanded farther than many earlier Chinese dynasties. By the reign of the Qianlong Emperor in the 18th century, the empire stretched across vast territories, from Manchuria to Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia, and the rich heartlands of China proper. To the imperial court in Beijing, China was not a weak country waiting to be opened. It was the center of civilization. Foreign merchants were allowed to trade, but only under strict rules. By the late 18th century, most Western trade was concentrated at Canton, known today as Guangzhou, under what historians call the Canton system. Foreigners could not travel freely through the empire. They dealt through licensed Chinese merchants and lived under tight supervision near the port. To the Qing court, this system preserved order. To British merchants, it felt like a cage. There was another problem. Europe wanted Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. China wanted silver. For years, silver flowed into China as foreign merchants paid for Chinese goods. But the British Empire, through its power in India, found a product that could reverse the flow. Opium. Opium had medicinal uses, and the Qing state had restricted and banned its non-medical use earlier, including under the Yongzheng Emperor in the 18th century. But by the late 1700s and early 1800s, the illegal trade grew rapidly. British merchants did not usually bring the drug directly from Britain. Much of it came from British-controlled India, where opium was cultivated, auctioned, and moved through networks of private traders toward the China coast. There, smugglers sold it offshore. Chinese middlemen carried it inland. Silver began to flow out. The effect was slow at first. Then it became impossible to ignore. Officials reported addiction among soldiers, clerks, laborers, and even members of the educated elite. The drug did not merely affect bodies. It affected the machinery of government. If officials took bribes to look away, imperial law became a performance. If soldiers smoked, military readiness weakened. If families spent silver on opium, household savings vanished. If silver left the empire, taxes became harder to pay and the price of silver rose against copper cash, squeezing ordinary people. The Qing court faced a terrible question. Was opium a moral crisis, a financial crisis, or a foreign policy crisis? It was all three. By the 1830s, the Daoguang Emperor, who ruled from 1820 to 1850, could no longer treat the trade as a distant coastal problem. Memorials, the formal reports sent by officials to the throne, warned that the empire was bleeding silver and discipline. Some officials argued for legalization and taxation, believing the state could control what it could not stop. Lin Zexu argued the opposite. Lin was a respected scholar official, a man formed by the Confucian ideal that government should defend moral order. In 1839, the emperor sent him to Canton with extraordinary authority. Lin moved with force. He arrested Chinese dealers. He demanded that foreign merchants surrender their opium. He wrote a famous letter addressed to Queen Victoria, appealing to moral principle and asking why a substance ban in China should be pushed upon Chinese subjects. Whether the letter ever reached the Queen is uncertain. But Lin's action at Canton could not be ignored. More than 20,000 chests of opium were surrendered and destroyed at Humen in June 1839. It was one of the most dramatic anti-drug actions in world history. To Lin, it was law restored. To British merchants, it was property destroyed. To the British government, it became a question of national honor, trade, and imperial power. The First Opium War began in 1839. The Qing court still believed it could manage the crisis as it had managed earlier frontier and coastal troubles. But the war revealed a brutal technological and military gap. British steamships, naval artillery, and disciplined expeditionary forces struck along the coast and rivers. Qing commanders often fought bravely, but the empire's defenses were fragmented, outdated, and poorly coordinated. The war moved from Canton to the coast, then toward the Yangtze River, the great waterway that carried the wealth of central China. In 1842, British forces threatened Nanjing. The Qing court had little choice. On August 29, 1842, the Treaty of Nanjing was signed aboard the British warship HMS Cornwallis. It was a turning point. China agreed to pay a large indemnity of 21 million silver dollars. Hong Kong Island was ceded to Britain. 5 treaty ports were open to British trade: Canton, Xiamen, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai. The old Canton system was broken. The treaty did not simply end a war. It announced that the Qing dynasty could be forced to change its laws by foreign arms. That was the deeper wound. For centuries, the emperor had claimed to rule all under heaven, a phrase that expressed a moral and political universe centered on the throne. After Nanjing, foreign powers could demand access, money, territory, and privileges. More treaties followed. The United States signed the Treaty of Wangxia in 1844. France signed the Treaty of Whampoa the same year. The pattern was clear. Once one power gained concessions, others wanted the same. Opium had opened a door that the Qing could not close. The drug trade continued. Smuggling adapted. Foreign communities grew in the treaty ports. Shanghai, once one port among many, began its transformation into one of the great commercial cities of Asia. Foreign merchants, missionaries, diplomats, and gunboats became permanent facts of Qing politics. Inside China, the consequences became even more dangerous. The dynasty's defeat damaged its prestige. Prestige mattered because imperial rule depended not only on armies and taxes, but on belief. The emperor was expected to maintain order between heaven, earth, and society. When foreign powers humiliated the court, many subjects began to doubt whether the dynasty still possessed the strength to protect the realm. Then came catastrophe from within. In 1850, the Taiping Rebellion erupted in southern China, led by Hong Xiuquan, a failed examination candidate who claimed a divine mission. The rebellion grew into one of the deadliest civil wars in human history. It was not caused by opium alone. Its roots lay in poverty, social unrest, religious vision, ethnic tension, and the failure of the state to manage crisis. But the empire that faced the Taiping was already weakened by the Opium War and the treaty system. Silver pressures, military decay, local corruption, and shaken legitimacy all mattered. The Qing state was fighting fires on every side. And foreign pressure did not stop. In 1856, another conflict began, known as the Second Opium War or the Arrow War. This time Britain and France fought the Qing. The war ended in deeper humiliation. The treaties of Tianjin in 1858 opened more ports, allowed foreign diplomats in Beijing, and expanded foreign rights. When conflict resumed, Anglo-French forces marched on the capital. In 1860, the old summer palace, the Yuan, was looted and burned. For the Qing court, this was more than military defeat. It was symbolic destruction. The Imperial Garden, built through generations of Qing wealth and taste, became a smoking ruin under foreign attack. The Convention of Beijing followed in 1860. More concessions were imposed. The opium trade was effectively legalized within the treaty system. The poison the Qing had tried to destroy at Humen had become part of the new order forced upon it. By then, opium had done several kinds of damage. First, it damaged the economy. The outflow of silver strained a monetary system already under pressure. Ordinary taxpayers often earned and spent in copper cash, while taxes were assessed in silver. When silver became more expensive, the burden on common people grew heavier. A drug trade that began as smuggling became a force that touched the village tax burden, the merchant world, and the imperial treasury. Second, opium damaged the state. Smuggling required bribery. Bribery weakened enforcement. Weak enforcement made imperial commands look hollow. Every official who accepted payment to ignore opium made the dynasty seem less like a moral guardian and more like a machine that could be purchased. Third, opium damaged military readiness. Qing soldiers and officers were not universally addicted, and foreign descriptions often exaggerated Chinese weakness for political reasons. But addiction within parts of society, including the bureaucracy and military, became a real concern for reformers. Even more important, the Opium Wars showed that the dynasty's military institutions had fallen behind a world of steam power, modern artillery, and industrial finance. Fourth, opium damaged sovereignty. This was the greatest harm. After the wars, the Qing court no longer fully controlled trade, tariffs, ports, or foreign legal privileges in its own territory. The treaty port system carved special zones into the empire's coastline. Foreigners gained rights that ordinary Chinese subjects did not possess. Missionaries moved inland. Diplomats entered the capital. Customs revenue became entangled with foreign influence. The dynasty survived. But it survived differently. It was no longer the unquestioned center of an East Asian order. It was an old empire forced into a new world on terms set by others. In the decades that followed, Qing officials tried to respond. The self-strengthening movement sought to adopt Western weapons, shipyards, arsenals, and technical learning while preserving Confucian rule. Men such as Zhang Guofan, Li Hongzhang, and Prince Gong understood that China could not simply return to the world before the Opium Wars. But reform was uneven. The court was divided. The empire was enormous. And every new crisis exposed the same wound: the Qing state had lost the initiative. The Opium Wars began what later Chinese memory would call part of the century of humiliation, a long period in which foreign powers imposed treaties, seized privileges, and forced China to confront its vulnerability. That phrase belongs to later nationalism, but the pain behind it began in moments like Humen, Nanjing, Tianjin, and the burning of the old summer palace. So did opium destroy the Qing dynasty? Not alone. The dynasty fell in 1912 after revolution, decades after Lin Zexu destroyed the opium at Humen. Between those moments came rebellions, reform failures, foreign wars, financial strain, court politics, and the rise of new revolutionary ideas. But opium was one of the first great cracks. It turned a trade imbalance into a social crisis. It turned a moral problem into a war. It turned a coastal smuggling fight into the opening of China's treaty port era. It showed the world that the Qing dynasty could be beaten. And perhaps most damaging of all, it showed many Chinese people the same thing. In 1839, Lin Zexu stood at the edge of the sea and tried to wash the poison away. The smoke rose. The chests disappeared. The water carried the opium out. But the damage did not vanish with it. It flowed back as warships, treaties, silver debts, ruined palaces, and a question that would haunt the Qing court until its final days. How could an empire that once ruled as the center of the world no longer defend its own shores?